Good morning, friends. Happy Vlogmas. Today is day 7 and it is December 13th. It is 5:57 a.m. from my home in Brooklyn. My name is Tashi, but if you're here for day 7, I imagine you know that by now. And this is where I've been opening my SnS Fiber Advent and sitting and spinning and chatting with you guys for the last few weeks. I feel like I can say for the last few weeks. Today's December 13th, so it's practically the end of week 2. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. It's been real swell, you guys. Real swell sitting here and opening fun presents and chatting with you guys about fiber and spinning and all of the good things. I am wearing my For Flock's Sake shirt to work today. It's by my Mitchell Wool Co. A bunch of my friends got these at Wool & Folk over the Rhinebeck weekend, and I did not go to Wool & Folk because I had to work. So then I did the thing that's, you know, the only acceptable thing to do, which is immediately come home and buy the shirt that all your friends were wearing. So I happened to get mine in black because they only had them in white at Rhinebeck, and I can't wear white. I'm a dirt magnet, and if I wear white, all of the particles in the universe instantly gravitate towards my clothing, and it's not a good time. So here's my black shirt. What did I want to say today? Oh, my moon's purple for Kristen because she's the only person who voted on what color the moon should be. So Kristen, if you watch it, purple moon for you. That thing in the background just brings me so much joy. It's not like a strong enough light to, like, you know, change the light of the space, but it is a little bit of a fun pop of color back there, and it brings me joy. Changing the colors, I was like, I should just leave it like a neutral warm white, but then I was just like, why? It has color. Like, let's change colors. Okay, I will show you what my Polworth spin finished up like. I ended up spinning the entire Polworth the same day because I really enjoy Polworth. Most of the Advent days I've been like spreading them out over 2 days, so I'll spin the little bit when we chat, and then like the next afternoon I'll spin a little bit more so I can stretch it out. But the Polworth I literally sat and finished. So here's a bobbin. It's super pretty, super squishy. I am a little bit concerned about getting the full 4 ounces on this because this is my first time using like a Lendrum bobbin with a comb top spin. I've been spinning my CVM fleece to this, but I don't know how much I'm getting on each bobbin because I'm spinning from like a bat. So whenever the bobbin feels full, I just stop and I move on. So I gotta say I'm a little bit concerned about whether I can get all 4 ounces onto this bobbin. We will see. I mean, I've seen people do 4-ounce spins onto a Lendrum all the time, so it's not impossible. So we'll see. We'll see how tightly I can pack it on. But we're opening day 19, also known as day 7, if you're doing it the way I'm doing it. And the present dance. Okay, the present dance gets weirder and weirder every day. I'm just jazzed. I'm jazzed. Can't help it. What is in here? Ooh, Targi again! Yay! Okay. Every time I open a fine wool, like I can tell BFL or Corey from a fine wool straight off the gate. Every time I open a fine wool, I'm like, is today the day that we meet my nemesis? But today is not the day. And look at how pretty this is. If like Sleeping Beauty had a color, that's what this feels like. This feels like the Sleeping Beauty colorway. So here, it's like gold. Oh, it has that like gross grello color. Here it is. It has that kind of gross grello color, that color that's kind of green, kind of yellow. This is my favorite yellow, that gross grello color. And then it has some pink, some peaches, like a pinky purple, and then it goes straight to like a periwinkle. I think periwinkle is like the closest way to describe this color. So we're gonna savage this and split this in 4 because we're working on the 4 bobbin of my 124 fractal. Yes, 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 the vocabulary lesson is coming. Fractal spinning is one of those things that I instantly gravitated to from like the second I looked up color management. So it interests me so much that like so many people are like, explain a fractal to me. How do you do a fractal? And I was just like, fractals are the first thing I learned to spin. But I wonder why fractals were the first thing I learned. You know why fractals were the first thing I learned to spin? I wanted to spin yarn to reproduce spin cycle. and spin cycle is a fractal. And I think that's why I immediately gravitated towards spinning fractals instead of spinning like a traditional 2-ply or 3-ply as it comes. I was like, how can I reproduce this yarn that is way too expensive for me to actually buy when I can spin it myself? And that's why I learned how to spin fractals. But today's not the vocabulary lesson. We're getting there. So you have one more day. 2 more days, because we're doing vocab on Saturday. So you have 2 more days if there are any terms you want me to add to the vocab list. The vocab list is pretty extensive. That video might be pretty long, but on the bright side, it's a weekend video, so there should be time. There's plenty. That's part of the reason why I'm filming it over the weekend, is because I want to make sure I have enough time to do it well, but also not do it and rush to work. I don't feel like I'm rushing to work most days, but like, normally we're only sitting here for 20 minutes and the vocabulary lesson might be considerably longer than that, depending on how many terms end up on the list, which is why we're filming it Saturday, so I have plenty of time to do it. So you have 2 more days. You have today's video and Thursday's video. So technically there's 4 more days. You have today's videos and Thursday's video. If there's anything you really want defined for the vocab lesson, Targi, love that. If there's anything you really want defined for the vocab lesson, drop it in the description box. That's not the description box. Drop it in the comments. I should not talk to people before 6 o'clock is what I'm hearing. Drop it in the comments if there's anything you really want defined for vocab, because we're doing it on Saturday. I'm going to turn my wheel around. Kristen also asked if she could see my face when I spin, but I don't think anyone wants to see my face when I spin, because I'm constantly, like, I have like this super furrowed brow sometimes. I'm like, I don't think anyone wants to see my face when I spin, but maybe for the last day. For the last day, we'll figure out how you can see my face and see my hands. But for today, you're stuck with my hands. What are we talking about today? Forgot to tell you. We are talking about fiber prep, because lots of people have questions about fiber prep. So we're going to talk about how I learned to wash wool and prep wool online, because I'm a student of YouTube University. We'll talk about my favorite resources for learning how to wash and prep wool, and we'll talk about what I use. Yeah, that's what we're doing today. So BRB when we turn the camera around. Okay. We're going. One of my friends let me know, yes, that day 6's video, my hands were out of focus and my camera kept focusing on the background. This is a newer, my lens is only a week old and I'm still trying to figure it out. So I realized that as I was watching that my camera was focused on the wrong thing. I think I've mitigated that today, but I honestly won't know until I watch the footage if I have. But I've set it to focus on my hands. So if it does that, then hopefully my hands will be in focus for the whole video. If it doesn't, sorry that it skips in and out. But also I'm only spinning short forward, which you've been watching me do for the last 6 days. Not doing anything revolutionary. But it frustrated me a little bit when I watched the video that my hands were not in focus and that it was focusing on the balls and balls of macrame cord behind me. But I didn't realize that until I went to, watch it back and edit it. So hopefully it's better today. I actually can't tell if it's better today. Hold on. We're going to have to like mess around and make sure it is actually better today. Okay, I think that looks better. But I'm also looking at my tiny camera viewfinder. So if it isn't better, you guys will have to forgive me as I learn my lens. What was I? Okay, so we're talking about fiber prep today. So before this summer and the School of Sweet Georgia releasing their fiber prep course, I do not know if there was a traditional like fiber prep course you could take, which I think is really sad, because I think there are a lot of people who are interested in processing raw wool, and there's just not like a great collected sort of resources where you're like, I could watch this class that's multiple episodes and that'll take me from, sorting and scouring a raw fleece to processed fiber that I can then spin. The School of Sweet Georgia now does have a class. I think it's Kim McKenna that teaches it, and it takes you from raw wool straight to prepped fiber. So if you are a member of the School of Sweet Georgia, that class is available to you. But I learned through YouTube University. I did a lot of Googling, a lot of watching videos, and then a lot of cherry picking what I wanted to do for my personal fiber prep process. So we'll start from the beginning. A lot of people use a lot of different things for scouring, for actually washing of the wool. Like that's step one, is washing. A lot of people use a lot of different things. I watched a lot of videos. I use Power Scour. I do know there are a few people who use Dawn dish soap. My thought process was, and this is just my thought process, is if they make something for doing the thing that I want to do, and I don't know how to do the thing that I want to do, I'm going to use the thing they make to do the thing I want to do. So if they make a soap for washing wool, I'm going to use the soap they make for washing wool versus like Dawn dish detergent, because then I have no idea what I'm doing. And people who use Dawn, you have to like balance it with vinegar and do a bunch of other stuff. And I'm lazy. I don't want to do all that other stuff. I want to scour and I want it to work. Like I don't want to have to risk the Dawn stripping the wool or doing all the other things that you hear. And then you can only use like one kind of Dawn. Like I think you have to use blue Dawn and it has to be like enzymatic. There was a bunch of other things involved in the soap purchasing process that I was just like, I'm just going to use the thing made for wool. So I bought Power Scour. I've never regretted buying Power Scour. In fact, I have 2 gallons of it. I have stopped buying it in 16-ounce bottles and have just started buying it by the gallon. And that's how you know you have a wool problem, when you start buying Power Scour by the gallon. You might have a wool problem like I do. So I now just buy it by the gallon. I don't even mess around with the little 16-ounce bottles because I was just going through it too quickly. You can use other things. There's Kookaburra Scour, but I don't like the way that smells. That's a personal choice. Kookaburra is also designed for washing wool, but there's something that's like tea tree in the Kookaburra that I just don't enjoy. So that's just a scent thing. I'm highly sensitive to smell, which is funny because I love the smell of a raw fleece, but I don't like perfumes. So I've never worn like scented soap or scented body lotion, or I don't wear perfume. My deodorant has to be really mild scented because I'm highly sensitive to smells, and it will make me sneeze like nobody's business. Like if someone's wearing a really strong fragrance and they walk past me, I will have a 10-minute sneezing fit. I don't like it. And so I didn't like the way Kookaburra smelled because I was just like, well, why not try all the things, right? And I know Orvis paste is something else you can use to wash, but I couldn't get it in a small enough quantity to try it out. Like Kookaburra and Unicorn, you can both get in 16 ounces, but I couldn't find a small tub of Orvis paste. So I started with a Unicorn and I stuck to Unicorn. And a bunch of people have asked if they could see my washing process. I'm going to have to figure that out and see if I can share it, because I'm doing all this stuff in a very small space and it's all really cluttered. And I mean, as much as I talk about not liking the aesthetics of things, it just wouldn't look very nice. I'm sure it would be very helpful, but it just wouldn't look very nice. So I got to figure out how to film and share that. But you start with your scour. I do a bunch of cold soaks, and some people have asked me about cold soaking. So when we do our spinning Q&A, I will talk a lot more about cold soaking because I have very strong feelings about it. I do it every single time. But I do a bunch of cold soaks. I scour until my water is no longer cloudy. There are some people who, subscribe to the certain number of scours thing. Like some people say you just need 1, some people say you just need 2. I scour until there's no more lanolin in my fleece, because I don't want to do the one and done and then I go through all the work of drying my fleece and putting it away, and then when I pull it out there's still too much lanolin in it to spin. So I scour until, because you can see the lanolin come off in the water. It makes the water look cloudy, kind of like, it just looks like there's something in it. So I scour until the water's clear, and then I do 2 rinses, and on my final rinse I dump a little bit of Unicorn fiber rinse in it, especially if I'm working with a long wool or a medium wool, and it just helps to condition the fiber after we've done all the lanolin stripping from it. And then I lay my fleece out on sweater drying mats to dry. When it's in the tub, I roll it up in a towel, I stomp around on it a little bit. I just got it like an industrial strength salad spinner. It's like a 5-gallon salad spinner, but I have not washed any fleece since I've gotten it, so I have no idea if it's going to really minimize my dry time. I washed like a little bit, but I have to, do like a full 3-pound fleece to like really put it through its paces before I decide if it's like a worthy investment or not, because they're big and they're expensive. But for the most part, I put my fleece on sweater drying racks in the living room and I leave it there to dry until it's done. From there, we comb or we card, and then we spin. And combing and carding are its own things, and there's lots of resources on how to learn to do that. So we're going to talk about how I learned to do all that online, because that's literally where I learned. So I will start by recommending Trish at Fiber Love Diary is where I learned how to scour. She scours for the most part with Dawn, but that's where I watched all the steps. And her videos are really informative because she has videos that take you through the whole thing. Like, it's not just, oh, here's one video on scouring, here's one video on combing, here's one video on carding. She has videos that take you through the entire sampling process from raw fleece to yarn. So it's a really good way to like kind of assess what you're getting yourself into if you decide you want to start processing. Oh my god, this Grello color is so pretty. I love it so much. So it's a really good way of assessing what you're getting yourself into if you decide to start washing and processing. I started saying washing, which is like combination of washing and processing. If you decide you want to start washing and processing wool, I highly recommend checking out Trish's channel. She's at Fiber Love Diary. I will leave everybody linked in the description box that we talk about. Every time I talk about someone's YouTube channel, I will always try to remember to leave it linked, so you can go chase down those references if you are so inclined. So Trish is great. Again, recommending Lisa at the Soulful Spinner. She has lots and lots of videos on washing and processing. She has a bunch of videos on just carding, like how to use your drum carder to card bats of fresh wool. Now I will say, my carding process is a little bit different because I like a real smooth bat. Like if there's any texture in my bat, I'm putting it through the carder again. I'm a little bit nuts when it comes to the smoothness of my bats. So where some people might stop with 2 or 3 passes, I sometimes always go to 4. Because I want a really smooth spin and I don't want to have to pull out like itty bitty bits of locks when I'm spinning. So there's sometimes I see people pull bats off of their carder and I'm like, I would have to go at least 2 more times, and they're happy to spin it. But that's like a personal preference, is how smooth you want your bats and how many times you're going to put it through your carder. The Romney alpaca bats that I made in episode 2 of the podcast, which it was the episode where my carder decided to squeak nonsensically and embarrass me. I carded those 3 times because they were pretty smooth by the 3rd time. But I've made other bats, like my Marge fleece, I carded those bats 4 times. Because I just wanted to make sure the locks were really open and really smooth. And I can tell, based on what it looks like, when I pull it off, if I have to continue to card it. But that's like a personal preference, and those are the things you learn as you work through your own journey. Lisa also has videos on hand carding and on combing, because you can card with hand cards. You don't have to have a drum carder. I use my carder because it's quick, but there are definitely some times where I just sit in front of the TV and make a few rolags. So she has videos on using hand cards to make rolags as well as combing. Taylor Owen at the Thread to Men podcast. I was like, what is the name of her show? At the Thread to Men podcast has a lot of videos on combing. Her video is the first time I was exposed to a hackle, and that's why I have them. I love a good hackle, but her video was the first time I was exposed to a hackle. And she has a lot of good videos on combing fine fleeces. I don't know if I've seen her wash just yet, but she has videos on sorting a fleece. And then she has videos on combing a fleece and prepping it for spinning. So like combing it into a comb top pretty much and prepping it for spinning. And I like watching different people do the same thing. There's something about seeing every person's process and figuring out what you want to adapt from their process into your own process that I find really valuable. So I will literally watch multiple people do the same thing over and over. Also, watching people play with wool, I personally find is really soothing, which is the other reason I will watch people. It's why I watch Lisa's podcast over and over. Like, I'm not learning anything new anymore. It's the same episodes I've seen a dozen times. I just like watching her work with wool. So there you go. But I find it really educational and informative to watch people do the same, do the same step. Watch multiple people do the same step. So who else? There's Crafting with Compassion. She has videos on carding, on using a drum carder, and on using hand cards. And there was one more person I wanted to mention, and I'm drawing a blank. Okay, I had to go through my YouTube history to figure out. I should have made notes. I was like, I don't need to make notes on this. I can chat about who I watch online all day, and then I should have made notes. Okay, so I had to go through my YouTube history to figure out the last two people that I was blanking on. So the Natural Spinner, I don't think she's shared anything in some time, but what she does have up there is great. She has a whole video up on what to do with combing waste, like how to read comb it and how to card it and how to use it up. That's how I discovered the idea of putting the combing waste in my Flicker and Flame hat, which I shared on episode 2 of the podcast. The gray and white yarn that I use as the contrast color is combing waste, which I learned from watching her. And I highly recommend her channel. She has a whole video on combing Polworth locks that is just so soothing. It's like ASMR for wool people. What is ASMR for your eyeballs? You guys, let me know in the comments if there's something that's ASMR for your eyeballs, because it's just fun to, it's soothing and fun to watch. Like, it's just, I've watched it over and over. I literally watch these videos over and over. I'm not joking. And Jillian Eve, Evie at Jillian Eve, has videos on scouring and processing. She has a whole series on working with alpaca, and she has a bunch of videos on working with raw wool. And if you're part of her Patreon, she has a whole class on getting you from fleece to sweater that takes you through the sampling process and all of the things you have to do before embarking on a large spin. And that's pretty much how I learned to process through YouTube. I will say, if you are on Instagram, I know social media is not for everyone. I get it. And I know that people watch YouTube videos and don't necessarily, migrate over to Instagram, because YouTube's easy. You can just sit in front of your TV and you don't have to deal with the echo chamber that is social media. I get it. I literally only use my Facebook profile to buy fleece. I never go on Facebook anymore because it is just a toxic soup sometimes. But if you are on Instagram, there are a few amazing resources out there. I highly recommend watching and following Melly Knits. Melissa, she's my Canadian wool broker, and she just gets tons and tons and tons of Canadian wool and processes it. She has a bunch of story highlights where she talks about like the Swint method, which is like fermenting the wool. I mean, it sounds horrifying and also really interesting, and if I had the space, I would do it, but I don't have the space because you kind of need to do that outside. But she has a whole story on like the Swint method. She has a bunch of stories on like washing in her bathtub or washing in her sink, and it's saved to her highlights, so you can literally watch it as many times as you want. So highly recommend following Melissa if you're interested in learning how to process raw wool. Brittany at Crux Fibers, I highly recommend following if you're interested in learning to process raw wool. And Michelle at My Name is Inigo. Now, there are tons of people who are processing raw wool on Instagram, but those are the people that I've noticed like share how they're doing it and like talk you through the steps of doing it. Because like I process, but I just show like photos, and I'm not really like online going, this is how you get through step 1, step 2. I will try to make an effort, especially here, because I think it's really helpful to have another perspective out in the universe about how you do these things. But Melissa has a really good setup and has lots of videos on her Instagram feed already about how she does it. So if you're like straight out the gate and you're like, what do I need? Need is a relative term. So here's what you need. You need soap. Like, that's a no-brainer. You need soap. You need a place to wash. I wash in my bathtub. If you have an outside space, you can wash outside and dump the water on your grass. I will say lanolin can be hard on your pipes. So what we do is if I'm washing, we throw like Drano down our tub just to make sure the pipes are clear. And then we run lots and lots of hot water after I empty the tub just to make sure that the lanolin is not hanging out in the pipes, because it can clog your pipes as it cools and cause a problem long term. So that's just something to be aware of. Especially if you live in an old house and that doesn't have like great pipes. You can always throw the water outside. So you need somewhere to wash and you need soap. You need somewhere to dry. I've seen people do the hanging herb drying racks. I don't have a place to hang herb drying racks, but I do the sweater racks because they're foldable and they're stackable. And then when I'm finished, I can separate them. They're actually in the corner. So if you're wondering what that like white mesh thing is in the corner, it's my sweater drying racks. Because once I'm done with them, I just take them apart. I put the connectors in a, see, here we go. Okay, messing with this was not a good idea. I put my connectors in this bag, and then right here are the mesh racks on the poles, and it just lives in this corner when I'm not washing. So it takes up very little space. Like 90% of my fiber supplies are right behind me. It takes up very little space. After you do your washing and your drying, you just need something to process it. So if you want combs, I have Valkyrie combs. It was very hard. I will say it was very hard to get Valkyrie combs. I don't know if they had like supply chain issues during COVID or what have you, or if everyone was just processing wool and all the combs were sold out everywhere, but it was very hard to get combs. But I have Valkyrie combs. I have extra fine and I have fine. And I have extra fine for, you know, extra fine fleeces and fine for everything else. You can get other brands of combs. I know there's Luette mini combs, there's Acorn combs, there's Indigo Hound. Like if you just search for combs, you can find combs everywhere. You also don't need to use like a fiber devoted prep tool. I've seen lots of people online just use miscellaneous things they have hanging around to process wool. If you don't want combs, or you want something in addition to combs, you can look into hand cards, or you can look into a drum carder. Now, I don't think that a blending board is the best tool for processing raw wool, because you need to be able to do the sort of back and forth motion between hand cards or between combs to really open up a lock. And with a blending board, it is just one and done. You put the locks on your blending board and then you can't really get them off. So if you want to make a really fun textured yarn, sure. But if you're trying to open up locks for like regular spinning, a blending board is not going to do it for you the way that hand cards or anything else would do. So just a heads up, if you had like a flicker and you flicked open your tips and your butts and then put it on the blending board, then maybe. But now you're using two tools because you're using a flicker and a blending board, and it's not the blending board that's doing the work for you, it's the flicker that's doing the work for you, because you can spin from flick locks. You can just flick your locks open and spin them just like that. So you would need some sort of cards. I've seen people use like dog brushes as a flicker, so you don't even have to buy a devoted flicker. There are ways around it. You can also just like rent this stuff. You can go on Ravelry and see what's secondhand, so you don't have to buy things new. I think, especially with wool processing, sometimes the cost can be a barrier to entry because it feels like you need all these tools. You don't need all these tools. I'm a tool junkie. You don't need all these tools. You just need soap. You need somewhere to dry, and you need something to process. You can start with a set of hand cards. I think Ashford hand cards full price go for maybe $70 US. But you can also find all these things secondhand. I'm going to link the Spinners Marketplace in the description box on Ravelry, because there are always spinners there looking to rehome tools that they aren't using anymore. So you could probably find combs or cards or any of those things. And then all you need after that is patience. You just need patience and time. It is very easy to get sucked into the idea that you must have the next thing, but you really don't need the next thing. You don't need combs and cards. Depending on what fleece you're processing, you could probably realistically card everything, and you'll just get a different prep than if you comb things. But if you're just starting out, there's no reason to buy all these tools if you don't even know if you're going to enjoy the processing aspect. I built my tool library over a year, which is admittedly very fast. But I built my tool library over a year, and I just kept adding things as I saw fit. So I have things that like not everybody else is going to have or need. I have a lock pop. I love my lock pop. I have my lock pop because a flicker is just hard on my wrists. I have carpal tunnel. I have old lady hands. So I have carpal tunnel, and the flicker motion is just very hard on my wrist. So I use a lock pop, and it has been life-changing. So those are a few things that you might want to look into further down the line. But realistically, all you need to start processing is soap, somewhere to wash your wool, somewhere to dry your wool, and maybe one or two tools for processing it. But I hope you take a look at the resources that I've mentioned, because they do a much better job at explaining this. And if you decide you want to start processing, let me know. We can chat. I can chat raw wool for literally days. I'm very, very passionate about it. I want to get more people into it because it keeps the... So here's the thing about raw wool. Farmers, not every farmer can afford to send their yarn, their fiber to a mill. Also, mini mills in America are super backed up. Like, I was talking to someone about potentially sending a few fleeces to the mill, and it was an 8-month wait. 8 months. Now, 8 months for a farmer to get their fiber back to then sell it might be a lot. Like, I don't know. I'm not a farmer, so I don't know what that life looks like. But I imagine if you're waiting 8 months to get any sort of financial return on the animals that you've taken care of for a year, that might be a lot. So I think selling to hand spinners is a really good way for farmers to have income coming in. So I kind of want to keep this craft alive, because if the farmers can't take care of the sheep and the sheep don't have work to do, then I feel like this craft is going to die out. So I'm really, really, really passionate about raw wool and about like all the things we can do with it, because it keeps the sheep working and it keeps the farmers working. And so that's important to me. So I will talk raw wool literally. Oh Lord, look at, I got a little overzealous and I forgot to move my peg. I will talk raw wool literally forever. So if any of you are inspired by me and decide you want to start processing, let me know, because we can just keep chatting about this and I can keep sharing all the things I've learned and all the things that I've been working on. So that is day 7, you guys. I did not get as far into this target as I did with the Polwarth. I am on my 3rd piece, so I did get to the halfway point. But that's day 7. Tomorrow, we're probably, not tomorrow, in 2 days, we're probably going to talk about D&D, because everyone has enabled me. Oh, that's the other thing, is if you have a specific question about D&D, just drop it in the comments. Ask all your questions in the comments. You have today and tomorrow, if you have a particular question about D&D, to drop it in the comments, and I will answer it when we chit-chat. We're going to chit-chat about how I started playing. We're going to talk about my campaigns. We're going to talk about my characters. You'll get a peek at my character sheets. I have multiple. Yeah, we'll see what happens. But that's it for today. So happy December. Happy Vlogmas. And I hope you make something magical today.